Well, I'm glad to have you on because I want to talk to you a little about. You've been known. You were on the forefront of treating COVID patients, and you were trying all different kind of things, and you had a lot of success in treating patients with different things. And so I wanted to bring. There's an article. It says COVID-19 lockdowns contributed to collective trauma among Americans. Who says that? Psychologists say that. It's the American Psychological Association says that the COVID-19 pandemic and associated lockdowns caused mass trauma, or do you say trauma, among adults that still persists to this day. So you don't say, what gave it away? All the mentally ill people still wearing masks? So
I think they might be traumatized.
I think they might be traumatized. The APA concluded in the results of its survey released on November 1st that there are signs of collective trauma among all age cohorts in the United States. That's a funny word.
Yeah.
The study found that adults between the ages of 34 and 44 reported the biggest surge in chronic health conditions since the pandemic, rising to 58% in 2023 from 48% in 2019. The same age, man, that's tough. The same age group also experienced the biggest jump in mental health illnesses, chiefly anxiety and depression. I suffer from both those things.
Maybe they're worried about climate change.
Maybe it's the climate. Maybe they're living under a flight path.
Maybe they're, yeah.
These rose to 45% this year from 31% in 20. That's a big jump. I'm not a math surgeon, but I think that's 14% jump. That's according to this study, right? So basically, the system worked, is what they're saying. Now that we got the trauma out of the way, bring on the mind control. I sure hope the heroes of our pharmaceutical industry will be able to help everyone with new science-based medications without that cumbersome regulation. So chronically elevated levels of stress create risks for various mental health challenges and wear down the immune system, according to the APA. The association noted that the data suggests that long-term stress sustained since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic has had a significant impact on Americans' well-being. Let me bring in Dr. Piracori to comment on this. Now, the effect of what the establishment did, their prescription to fight COVID, actually made people sicker, created chronic elevated levels of stress. And what does that do? It wears down their immune system. Have you seen this in your practice?
Well, Jimmy, I interpret that study a little bit differently. Sorry, but the lockdowns were 2020, essentially. That's almost 3 years ago, right? If you look at all of those snippets that you clipped from that article, you could substitute, instead of lockdown, how about repeated assaults with mRNA vaccines? Because they can cause all of those things: neurological injuries, chronic illness conditions, immune suppression, anxiety, depression. And they want to talk about, they want to blame this on lockdowns from 2023. I mean, I agree it's trauma. I mean, what those lockdowns did, and one thing I'll say about lockdowns, right, which has been said many times before, is that there was one universally accepted, I thought, consensus around the science of lockdowns prior to COVID, which is that they are ineffective and they cause more harm than benefit. That was generally accepted by epidemiologists, infectious disease specialists, public health officials. Yet the pandemic came and we locked down. So the lockdowns are obviously failed and did cause a lot of trauma. Not only loss of livelihood, businesses, massive amounts of losses to the economy, but that's almost 3 years ago, right? And then why are we so sick still from those lockdowns?
So you're saying that like the Cleveland Clinic study found that the more boosters you got, the worse off it was for your immune system. Is that what you're saying?
One part of what I'm saying, absolutely.
So but let me just also correct you that the mRNA COVID vaccine is magical and it is safe and effective, and it will keep you from getting seriously ill, death, or hospitalized, and it will not stop the spread, but it will certainly slow it. So whatever you're going to say now is garbage. Go ahead. What do you have to say?
Well, I'm just going to say the data that I have seen doesn't seem to support those statements, but I guess people have to make those statements, Jimmy. But but
Science.
But no, I mean, I think I know you're deeply studied on the topic, and the data screams everything but that, right? And another data point that cannot be ignored is that in these 3 years, the life expectancy of Americans went from 79 to 76. How do you have a whole nation whose average life expectancy now drops by 3 years?
Really?
Who's dying?
Climate
Who's dying
change.
to make that happen? Is it 80-year-olds who are dying? Or is it 20-year-olds? Do some math, Jimmy. Arithmetic.
Oh, okay. So I would chalk that up to climate change.
Yeah.
Or
Gotta watch that climate change.
Yeah, you got to watch that climate change, or people watching TV late at night. That has a lot to do with it. Certainly, myocarditis comes from living in the path of a airplane.
Yeah. I'm with you.
So that's what you say, but I got to tell you, the FDA and the CDC contradict you, and so does Dr. Fauci. The coronavirus, while being very deadly, is very respectful of meal times. You can't catch it if you're eating, and that's why we let you take your mask off on a plane. So let me there's a little bit more to this. Chronic stress can cause inflammation, breaking down the immune systems and raising the risk of all sorts of ailments, including stroke and heart disease, the APA warned. If my blood pressure after I got was 180 over 120. And what I say is I could have had a stroke and been president. That's what I was hoping.
Could have stroked your way up the ladder.
The study is the latest that suggests that the heavy-handed response to the outbreak, which included school closures, business shutdowns, and near universal mask wearing, has had a negative effect on people's physical and mental health. Let me ask you this, Dr. Corey. I still see people wearing masks. Now, if you wear a mask all day, that is actually detrimental to your health, is it not?
There's no question that there's negative consequences to constant mask wearing, for sure. There's no reason to do it. And no one ever talks about the negative consequences. It's always heralded as this, universal benefit and some sort of protection. But I feel bad for people who feel compelled to wear the mask all day long. Obviously, it offers them some source of comfort and, unfortunately, a sense of false protection. But I understand COVID in these last few years as an information war, and the amount of information that circulates, especially from major media sources, unfortunately conditions people to do very strange things that really aren't scientifically based, and is really misrepresents all of the science around those what they call NPI, non-pharmacologic interventions, like masks.
Now, all those people who attacked you, I'm sure, have apologized, right? Because they realized they were wrong.
Oh, Jimmy, you should see my mailbox. It's, literally truckloads of apology letters that are dumped on my kitchen table every day, and it takes me most of the morning to go through them. But I read every one because they're such a pleasure.
So there's a little bit more to that. Here's a little thing that was a little surprising to me. In 2021, when lockdowns and other COVID-19 restrictions were pervasive, more child homicides and suicides by gun were recorded than in any year since 1999, according to the study. Some see a clear causal link between the explosion in child gun deaths and pandemic lockdown policies, which other studies have linked to a variety of negative outcomes, including delayed health treatments, learning loss, and mental health crises. So, did you know that?
Well, that's totally unsurprising. I didn't know that particularly, but I want to call to attention that they're starting to make sense. They're tying rates of terrible outcomes to 2021. They're not using lockdowns to explain those numbers in 2023. What I find quite astonishing about this article is that they seem to be tying everything to lockdowns when most of the rest of the media ties everything to long COVID. I think long COVID would be a better fit for it. Now, leaving aside the fact that most of what I see in my practice is long vax, 70% of my patients in my practice, we have over 1,000 patients, all of their chronic illnesses stem from the vax, about 30% stem from COVID. But long COVID is a better fit to explain most of this stuff, except for this. This seems very lockdown specific, for sure.
The gun, okay, all those gun schools, we had some mass shooting news. And I remember him saying, like, I bet a bunch of people were taking those SSRIs.
So I think what happened was a lot of people got depressed during lockdowns or felt like they did and had anxiety. And so they got probably prescribed SSRIs a lot more. And now there's a link between SSRIs and suicide and mass shootings, right? Or there's some people homicides. There's some people who are saying that. I'm not saying that. Of course, SSRIs are fantastic.
No, they now say they don't do the thing.
They're improved, but they don't work the way they said they did. So the science was always off on that. They were always wrong. And they don't know.
In the commercial, they said they had the language that said, "We think this is how it works." In the original commercials,
they said
to tell your doctor to give it to you. Yeah, and watch it.
I also found out that Prozac was originally researched as being a weight loss drug, but then they found out they could get it approved easier if they said it was a mental health drug, because I guess it's harder to disprove that stuff. So then as soon as they got it approved for mental health, they started recommending it be used off-label as a weight loss drug. Did you know that?
I did not. You're teaching me something here, Jimmy. That's interesting.
Okay, so yes. But again, the FDA has approved all these things, so I am not going to say anything. They're fantastic drugs, and if there are side effects, they're very rare. Very rare. And of course, it doesn't cause people to commit homicides. That's just a theory, and of course, it doesn't.
Just pretty much all of them were on those, though.
It's sure all of them were on it, but they were probably on it because they were already homicidal. That's what people say.
Well, this is what I want to ask the doctor. Have you ever? Because I'm guessing this is kind of oversimplified the way I understood those, but there was a higher suicide rate and the gambling thing, and there's something about it that kills anxiety. So people end up not being anxious about suicide because you naturally would feel like, you shouldn't do that. Is that how that works, or am I completely off base?
That may be one hypothesis as far as how to do the cause and effect there, but no, my understanding is that it really does alter neurotransmitter functioning and thought processes. And suddenly patients what befalls them is really uncontrolled thoughts, which are literally propelling them to do these actions, and they don't have, that's what an obsession or a compulsion is, right? An obsession is a thought over which you don't have control. A compulsion is an act over which you don't have control. And these people suddenly are victims of obsessions and compulsions, and they do these rather heinous acts. And they've been repeatedly linked to antidepressant use. And in some of the big court cases, it's literally within days of starting these medicines. The temporal association is unmistakable. And so the influence of SSRIs in a lot of this mass gun violence and tics and homicides and suicides, it's clearly not been investigated appropriately, right? You can't find what you don't look for. But those of us, for instance, a Midwestern doctor, a colleague of mine, is deeply studied, or they are deeply studied on the topic, and they've uncovered really troubling data to suggest a really strong linkage between the two.
Well, Dr. Corey, I appreciate you reading my article. So I just want to show. So Kevin Bass, he's a PhD and an MS. I guess he has that disorder, muscular sclerosis. And that's weird to put it in your title, though, that you have muscular sclerosis. Multiple sclerosis. That's it. Due to lockdowns, what does MS stand for?
Multiple sclerosis.
No, but he's put
Master of Sciences.
Oh, Master of Sciences,
Whoa,
Kurt.
That's
Don't
impressive.
Be a jerk. Due to lockdowns and other misconceived pandemic policies, child gun deaths in the United States exploded exponentially in 2020. Look at that. Boom. It goes like that. Boom, boom. And I don't know what the red line's for. What is the red line? Who knows? I don't have time to look it up.
Didn't a lot of more people have guns in their house, too, at that time because of the BLM riots? Remember the
BLM?
Could afford
people
ammo?
went out. That's right.
Probably
People
a
went
lot
out,
of stuff
people went out and bought more guns because of the BLM.
Yeah.
BLM. Yeah. The study's findings dovetail. I love when things dovetail. With an April report from the Pew Research Center, which found that the number of children and teenagers killed by gunfire surged by 50% between 2019 and 2021. Some studies have identified lockdowns as contributing to jumps in suicides, mental health crises, learning loss, and delayed health treatments. I think that's all undeniable, right?
It sounds like prison stuff. Like normally you're in a more roomy prison, and then you got put in
and you get
the confinement of the prison, which is worse than the normal prison you live in.
Get this. This is kind of stunning. The price tag of lockdowns in terms of public health is high. By using the known connection between health and wealth, we estimate that lockdowns may claim 20 times more life years than they save. That's according to this study, the author said.
It doesn't matter. We're trying to save the hospital from running out of beds.
Yeah,
we're trying to save their stupid life.
Hospital beds, Kurt. The author also said that what deserves special and urgent analyses is the question of to what extent, why, and how the dissenting scientific opinions were suppressed during COVID-19. And those dissenting opinions were disproved by healthcare officials. Well, then they should be suppressed. I think if you go against the FDA or Fauci or Dr. Collins, you should be. So talk about that, about how you were suppressed personally when you had a dissenting opinion about how to treat COVID.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could speak about it too, Jimmy. I mean, you've certainly had some censorship, exercised on your.
But it's for my own good.
Knowledge.
For my own good, I had it coming.
And that's interesting that the article, obviously it brings that out, because that to me is probably one of the greatest harms of the pandemic, which is that we did not have a free flow and exchange of information, transparent dissemination of data and discussion. And for those of us who have been, I don't know what you'd call us, I guess we're the COVID dissidents, but I would call us experts on numerous aspects of COVID. And we just kept finding science that literally was 100% discordant with policies. And so we asked questions over and over and over again. Why are you saying to do this when the data says to do that? And anytime we sort of brought that up or advocated for a policy or an approach or a treatment that was not favored or approved by the authorities, everything was brought to bear on us. I mean, if you look at my organization, PayPal dropped us as a way to attract donations. Vimeo canceled our accounts and wouldn't give us our money back. Shopify, we were selling clothes, got rid of us. Deplatformed, delegitimized, kicked off of social media. Press wires that we were putting out press releases on new discoveries and new treatments and new studies. They wouldn't even carry our press releases anymore. I mean, this was pervasive. It wasn't just that, we know some of it now is directed by the government, but everybody fell in line. So many different institutions and corporations of society colluded to really drown out any dissenting opinion, no matter how credible, no matter how many degrees, no matter how experienced you were, no matter how much time you spent on the front lines, no matter how many hundreds or thousands of patients you treated, and your expertise and insights that you wanted to share, you were censored. And then the worst form of censorship, Jimmy, that's the overt one. But another form of censorship is when they attack your credibility. And, when I had to, the first time, I became, somewhat known because of my advocacy, especially in my Senate testimonies, which I gave twice in the pandemic. You go to Google me and it's just dozens of hit jobs in media calling me things that are blatantly false. Again, this is my first experience reading about myself in a newspaper, and it hasn't been pleasant. And I understand that's an unpleasant experience for most people, but for me, it was really hard to read at first. I didn't like the guy they were talking about. He sounded really just like a terrible actor.
Yeah, well, they just lie. I had that happen. All of them come down on me. I didn't know they just lie. I thought they had to kind of.
They kind of had to say something factual. No, but you know what? I didn't mind it so much because when they did a story about me, and the headline in Newsweek was I was the head of the dirtbag left. They used a picture of me from 2003 from the Ice House, and I looked fantastic. And
you didn't look like a dirtbag in that picture.
Oh, I did not. I looked like I could do some damage. But so here they are. They're saying that they want to have. The authors said that what deserves special and urgent analysis. So sure, it deserves an analysis, and it deserves an inquest and a criminal trial and an overhaul of healthcare and a lot of other stuff that ain't gonna happen. Right? This is not going to happen, right, Doctor?
No, first of all, it's not going to happen, but I'm just going to reiterate my point. You actually don't need to do a special and urgent analysis because that's already been done on prior lockdowns that have been done in other epidemics and pandemics. It's well known as almost a consensus truth. That's not how you respond to pandemics. The cure is worse than the disease. So I don't know how many times we have to relearn history, but if they want to do it again, they can.
And so you're probably one of those people who think natural immunity is a thing. right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what
Yeah,
I tried. I was just in Hermosa Beach on Saturday night in a room full of comedians, and I had to explain to them that they lied about everything. They lied about masks. We have had pandemics in my lifetime, at least a couple, before COVID. And the consensus was you don't do lockdowns. You do targeted protection of people who are vulnerable, the elderly, the obese, people with comorbidities. You don't worry about healthy people. And that's what they did. They made everybody, and you don't wear masks. Even Dr. Fauci before COVID, I have videotape of him saying on C-SPAN, no, you don't wear masks because it actually has unintended consequences that are deleterious. You end up fidgeting with your mask and touching it, and you get stuff from schmutz on your fingers, on your fan, and then it gets on your eye. The whole thing, it's not. So they knew you weren't supposed to wear masks. They knew you weren't supposed to do lockdowns. They knew natural immunity was a real thing, and they pretend that they lied about all those things. And the reason I know that Dr. Fauci lied about herd immunity and he lied about masks, because he admits he lied about them. Anyway, so here's one more slide from that story. Suppression of misleading opinions causes not only grave consequences, this is according to the study, not only grave consequences for scientists' moral compass, it prevents the scientific community from correcting mistakes and jeopardizes, with good reason, public trust in the science, they wrote. So that's why, I guess, public trust of medical institutions and our overall healthcare apparatus is at an all-time low, is it not, Doctor?
What the 100%? I mean, they didn't practice science. I mean, if you're going to have trust in medical doctors and science, you have to show that you know how to, which is literally exchange of information, open debate, transparency, and rationale, logic, right? Using data, marshaling, a conclusion and a recommendation. None of that happened. And, the other thing that it does to science, right, is when I go back to that censorship piece, by discrediting me, right, it takes away my voice because no one wants to listen to a discredited, fringe, quack, radical, anti-vax doctor, right? All things that have been tagged with. But it gets worse. What's hard for the scientific community is that they've gone beyond just attacking my credibility. Now, the American Board of Internal Medicine is in the process of removing my 3 board certifications.
No way.
Pulmonary diseases and critical care medicine. They voted to remove my board certification. And Jimmy, let me just finish by saying why they're doing that. It's my strong belief. It's not even a question of why they're doing it. They're doing that to make an example. They want to show all the other doctors in the country that if you have an independent opinion, no matter how much data it rests on, if it goes against their consensus, then you should not earn your board certification. And basically, it's going to turn already quiet doctors even more silent. Who is going to fight, for objectivity, for science, for data at this point? If you're going to lose your livelihood.
So in California, they passed a law that the governor signed that said that you would be a criminal and they would disbar you from practicing medicine if you treated COVID in a way that in any way contradicted the establishment's protocols. So if you actually practice medicine, which is what doctors are supposed to do, you would be punished for doing that around COVID. Now, they have since, and those are the same people in California who say that they're doing that to doctors in Florida. They always point to Florida, saying that they're the fascists. They're the ones that, but no, it's the exact opposite. The liberal California, which is completely beholden to corporate interests. If you ever want to see what a state looks like if it gets controlled by complete Democrats, come to California. People living under every bridge, people being punished for practicing medicine. And
it's basically your government will now be the companies.
Yes,
that's what it is to vote for. Is like
that's right.
Which corporation control your life?
So okay, well, let me talk to you about this now. So you are the FLCCC Educational Conference in 2024, Healthcare Revolution, Restoring the Doctor-Patient Relationship. This is happening in Phoenix, Arizona, February 2nd to 4th. Now, I wanted to go there. Unfortunately, I'll be in Milwaukee telling jokes to the people, bringing people together, giving them the spiritual nourishment that they need. Everyone serves in their own way. But so tell me about this and what's going to happen there.
Jimmy, I like what you just said, because what you're going to be doing in Milwaukee, I think that's part of what we want to do at that conference is we really want to create a community and a space where we can connect and collaborate and have a community of people who are interested in their health. They're still interested in objectivity and good science, and they want to engage that way. And we're trying to restore that kind of doctor-patient relationship and a community of patients, a community of providers, because listen, our healthcare system, it has been broken for a long time, but the brokenness was accelerated in COVID and exposed to all. And so I think there's a lot of people and providers that are really unmoored. They don't have the same trust in the institutions. They can't rely on the institutions. And so we're trying to create a new place for people to engage and learn really how to preserve and protect their health. And, that's, I think, one of the goals. The other goal is that, a number of us in the FLCC, we're experts at treating this new, really pandemic or epidemic of, unfortunately, what we call spike protein induced diseases. And that's the diseases of long COVID and long vax. And there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are really literally debilitated and disabled from the after effects of the spike protein, whether it came from the virus or the vaccine. The spike protein is a toxin, and it's a wickedly complex disease to treat. We're getting a lot of experience, and we're going to share it not only amongst us for providers, but as well as patients. And, one last thing, Jimmy, is your government at work, right? So far, they've committed $1.2 billion to the study of long COVID, because remember, long vax doesn't exist. But even long COVID, at last check from a month ago, they have 4 trials set up to study therapeutics in long COVID. Not one patient had been enrolled as of a month ago, after $1.2 billion. And you know what the only trial is that's ready to enroll patients? It's a trial studying Paxlovid.
Oh boy, because Paxlovid, they can make money off of Paxlovid. That's what this is all about, right?
Oh, you're so sharp, Jimmy, man. You're not new to this, huh?
So didn't they also say, so when I was such a dummy. So when I got COVID the first time, I was afraid I was going to get long COVID because I was susceptible to an injury from the spike protein. Let's put it that way. Yep. So I can keep my channel. And so I demanded from my doctor the Paxlovid, and I got it. And then, of course, I got COVID again right away. And then it turns out that they figured out that is actually common. Is it common or rare that you take Paxlovid and you get it again?
Paxlovid rebound, it's a joke. It happens to most people I've heard of treated. Now, I've never treated anyone with Paxlovid, but I've certainly taken care of people who've come to me after being treated with Paxlovid. So, your experience is not unique. But the idea of using an antiviral, a purported antiviral, in this chronic illness syndrome is beyond absurd. Viral persistence or replication is not the cause of long COVID or long vax. And so, but it just shows you our system at work, right, Jim? You see that. It's not a surprise that that's the first thing that they're going to study.
So all I know is that the booster uptake in the United States is somewhere around 2%. So what that means is, though, no matter how many times I was castigated for doing my own research into the vax and the COVID, that eventually, apparently, 98% of the people in the country decided to do their own research. So but they're doing it very quietly, and they're not telling anybody they're doing their own research.
I think they did research. I think they're just like, I'm not going to get it, and I'm just going to, I did my due, like the Bill Maher thing. Yeah, I took it for the team, but now I'm not sure. I'm just not going to look into it. I'm going to focus on more important things like Ukraine and Israel.
Yes. So you're familiar with that? That's very low uptake of the booster, right?
We should have 8. Dr. Corey, you told us that
you're supposed to be on like 8 right now.
Yeah, I think we're up to that. If you'd followed every recommendation and schedule, yeah. So, I interpret that 2% a few possible ways. The most encouraging one to interpret it is that you're right, that the American population have finally discovered the danger of these and the inefficacy. And they're saying, I've had it, right? So that could be one reason why it's only 2%. The other could just be vaccine fatigue. I mean, after 7 or 8 in a span of 2 years, do you really want another one?
If you're joking,
and then,
go ahead.
And then the third, unfortunately, is you wonder, is that low number because it's not free anymore?
Oh,
So
it's
is there
not
a
free anymore?
financial-
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
It's not free.
And so, yeah, so some people, I mean, with insurance, I've seen, unfortunately, I'm going to just cite where I get my sources. I did see people post on social media that they actually went for their vaccine and they were very disappointed to be facing a $180 charge. And they said, I'm not doing it. So
Can you imagine paying $180
No.
oh my God.
To do that to
Come
yourself?
on, it's got to be free. I want to get it in me.
And let me just, again, I have to contradict you. That's okay. I just have to contradict you that the vaccines are very safe and effective. And if there are side effects, they're very rare. And they boost your immune system. There's no doubt about it. And they keep you out of being hospitalized, seriously ill, or death. And it doesn't stop the transmission, but it certainly slows the transmission. And that's what everybody cares about, is getting sick in a slower way. So, Dr. Corey, I really appreciate you coming on. So now regular people can go to, you don't have to be a medical professional?
Nope. We encourage, come one, come all. And, we have interest and support from really diverse, swaths of the population. There's some really engaged lay people. And it's been my experience, Jimmy, outside of my kind of close network of deeply studied clinicians, it's really lay people. They, on average, what I've seen is their knowledge of COVID and many of the aspects around the vaccines and even, the things like lockdowns. The lay people that I engage with are far more knowledgeable and deeply studied than the average physician. But, this kind of conference is for those who've been really engaged, deeply studied, have lots of questions and want to learn more. And we want to learn from them and we want to teach what we know. And I think it's going to be a really great conference.
And so a good way to help boost your immune system, I know, is laughter. They say laughter is the best medicine. And you can get your laugh on the day after Thanksgiving in Burbank, California at the Flappers Comedy Club. I'll be there telling jokes. Kurt will be there. Steph Zamorano will be there. We'll all be helping boost your immune system. So go to jimmydore.com. There's a link for tickets. There's still about 50 tickets left available. At that show the day after Thanksgiving. What a good time to go to a good comedy show and hear me do all my COVID lies or funny jokes. Plus, I've got the new Israel jokes. Hilarious stuff about Israel. Anyway, Dr. Corey, I appreciate it. So people can get tickets to this. Where should they go? Do they have to get a ticket?
Go
to
flccc.net. That's their nonprofit organization website. And there's a nice link to go to the conference and register. So it's flccc.net.
Hey, come see us doing a live stand-up show. We'll be in Burbank, California, Oxnard, California, Venice, California, Palmdale, California. Then we're going to Omaha, Des Moines, Milwaukee, Lansing, Bend, Oregon, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, and Boston, Massachusetts. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.